Welcome back to the Happy Saver podcast. I'm Ruth, a personal finance blogger right here living in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Now, in this podcast, I chat with a diverse bunch of people. I learn their story and then I condense it down so that you can hear helpful, relatable stories from Kiwis who are sharing their experiences, their tips and their point of view on personal finance here in New Zealand. So thanks for letting me join you on your commute, your walk, your run, or while you get some jobs done around your house. In today's episode, you'll hear from an awesome couple, Kate and Taka, aged 33 and 34, who are doing life and money a little differently, and they're doing it well. From the moment we started talking, I could tell that they'd put a lot of thought into not just their finances, but how they want to live. Over the past few years, they've made some bold, intentional choices, moving south, stepping back from full-time work to each working just 2 days a week, and prioritising time with their 3 young kids. It's not the typical path, but they've carved it out thoughtfully and intentionally and mathematically. Now, we chat about how they've managed to build a life that gives them both freedom and stability by sticking with frugal habits from their student days, questioning whether more work really does mean more money, and making financial decisions as a true team. Taka's a fan of the numbers, Kate brings a big picture perspective, and together they've found a rhythm that really works. Now, this episode is packed with practical tips, honest insights, and a refreshing example of what it really looks like to live by design, not by default. So, righto, before we dive into Kate and Taka's story, here's just a quick word from our wonderful sponsor, Pocketsmith. I like to think of myself as being onto it when it comes to knowing what my money is up to when I'm not looking, but I can't be paying attention all the time. Thank goodness for Pocketsmith. While I was soundly sleeping recently, somebody silently took money for a software subscription I had forgotten I even had. The next morning, coffee in hand, Pocketsmith immediately highlighted this transaction. A quick check using their powerful search engine for transactions showed me that a year had flown by since I'd first signed up. Straight away, I contacted the company, cancelled the subscription, and had them reimburse the charge. If you want to find expenses in your budget that you have forgotten, Pocketsmith is your secret weapon to regain control of your finances, avoid unnecessary spending, and reallocate funds to more meaningful or essential areas of your life. If you want to supercharge your finances with Pocketsmith, have we got a deal for you. Happy Saver listeners get a whopping 50% off your first 2 months of Pocketsmith's foundation plan. To get your deal, go to pocketsmith.com/the Happy Saver. That's pocketsmith.com/the Happy Saver. Kate and Taka are an awesome couple who currently live in one of New Zealand's southern cities. For privacy, I'm not going to share exactly where, and they've also requested a name change, so Kate and Taka it is. To kick things off, I asked each of them to tell me a little bit about each of their upbringings. Taka's father was Korean-born but grew up in Japan, where his mum is from, and his parents moved to New Zealand and to the city Taka and Kate now call home. His father, in particular, had a tough life growing up in poverty, and he fought against the odds to train and work as a pathologist, and his mum, before having children, was a nurse. He said his parents earned well, but making money and spending money were two very different things. And Taka said he always had everything he needed, particularly when it came to education and extracurricular activities that supported his learning. His dad was always trying to spend as little as he could, always trying to get a deal, and always saving money with his bank. He hated to waste money, using it only to buy the necessities in life. And now, in his 70s, his dad is still working and still saving. Taka is the youngest of 5, and his mum put nursing to one side to be a stay-at-home mum. However, when she could, she would earn money by helping in various ways Japanese students who chose to study in New Zealand. She also always had a university paper on the go as well, and was always trying to learn something new, and to this day, she is constantly learning new skills, Taka said. Now, after many years in New Zealand, in 2012, his parents moved back to Japan. Now, Kate, on the other hand, grew up in Canterbury with a younger and older sibling. Now, similar to Taka, her father was also a doctor working as a GP, and her mum, who was originally from the UK, always worked full-time as a nurse and later went into nursing training roles. Kate's parents divorced when she was 7, and although they never struggled for money, they didn't earn the income that Taka's family would have, but it was enough that she always felt secure with her needs taken care of. Kate's mum in particular served as a role model, showing Kate that you need to work hard if you want to save for and reach your goals, monetary or otherwise. As far as getting the chance to work or handle their own money young, they both had different experiences. Kate started earning pocket money from the age of about 7, and she was always divvying it up into savings buckets. She said she always liked the security of having savings, and she still does. She started at part-time jobs while she was still in school, doing cleaning work, babysitting, supervising after-school and holiday programs, plus on occasion a little bit of receptionist work at her dad's workplace. When she was about 13 or 14, her parents decided that her father should pay her about $300 each month to cover the majority of her own expenses so she could learn to manage money herself. And she recalls that it just felt like too much money and there was not much guidance around how to use it. But she muddled through and, as she got older, she got good at living within her means, always saving a small portion of every paycheck. Now, this made me remember the quote from the richest man in Babylon, and that is, a part of all you earn is yours to keep. A really important money principle to learn so young. As Kate transitioned out of school and into university, she continued to work part-time while she studied. Now, Taka was always very interested in money, but he never had a part-time job which would have given him the chance to manage some. If he needed something, it would be bought for him. But if he wanted something, well, the wait was far longer. So his basic needs were met, but I'd imagine that his list of wants got pretty long by the time his birthday came around, and that he only ever got a very few items from that list. His upbringing was a bit weird, he said, in that he had a lot of unsupervised hours when he was home after school, but his parents were elsewhere. He explained that his parents always used cash, so there was always money in the house, a few dollars of which he used to steal to spend at the local shop. He also distinctly remembered that, without his parents being aware of it, he sold his toys door to door around his neighbourhood to get the money to buy something he wanted. He had clearly worked out, very young, that money was handy and he was finding his own way to acquire it. From the age of 15, he started to get around $5 to $10 a week in pocket money, which was quickly spent at the school canteen. He wanted to save, but he needed to eat too, and it wasn't until years later when he began to earn an income that his savings habit really started to kick in. They said that neither of their parents actively taught them about money, but good behaviours might have been modelled, and I could see that Kate's parents in particular were trialling a few money management ideas along the way. I think that each of their parents are like most parents. They just figure that their kids will work stuff out, so they might have just gone with the flow. Personally, I've noticed that children who had parents that did actively teach about saving, budgeting, investing and spending feel more in control of their money from an early age. And it's pretty easy too to assume that a scarcity mindset is something that is taught to children. Now, I think it's pretty cool that Kate and Taka met at school, aged just 13 and 14, and it's safe to say that they have really grown up together. They both completed year 13 and each used the break before university started to head overseas to visit family, Taka to Japan and Kate to Japan and Britain and Scotland, Wales and Italy. For Taka, it is very likely that his parents paid, but for Kate, she had been saving up in anticipation of this holiday, so she clearly recalls paying for it herself and travelling as cheaply as she could. Taka then headed off to university to study pharmacy and she to study in a medical profession. His education was completed at one university and it took him 4 years plus a 1-year internship in a different city. Her education took 8 years in total, a mix of undergraduate and honours degree plus postgraduate study, including gaining her master's. To continue her education and course, she was also required to move around a few cities in New Zealand. Now, paying for tertiary education is top of mind for me at the moment, as my daughter is gearing up to head to university in 2026. I wrote a blog post on it last year called How Our Daughter Will Pay Cash for University, where I worked out the cost to be about $26,000 to $30,000 per year all in. So I was interested to learn about Kate and Taka's education. And I'm pleased I asked, as they both came at it from different angles and both used student loans in varying ways. In their first year, they both continued to live at home as the university was in the same city as their whānau, and this saved them a great deal of money as they didn't have to pay rent, utilities and food. In his first year, Taka's parents also gave him $20 a week, but $20 in the real world didn't get him far, so after much debate and him putting his best argument forward, they increased his allowance to $50. In his second year and beyond, he moved out of home and his parents gave him a $250 weekly allowance, which pretty much covered his rent and living costs, and he was able to really focus on his studies instead of money, he said. $250 was enough to cover all his outgoings, simply because throughout uni, he was putting all his education costs on his student loan, including fees and living costs and the annual $1,000 of course-related costs. Now, only the $1,000 was paid as cash, and he deposited it in a savings account with his bank. This was his cash buffer for an emergency, he said, and by borrowing the majority of his outgoings, with $250 of cash coming in weekly, he had enough cash to get by. Plus, he was saving as much as he could at his bank, even though he was going further into student debt each and every month. Taka got a part-time job in a pharmacy when he was in his third year of study, and when his course ended, he got a summer studentship which paid him $5,000. Over that particular summer, he managed to save $10,000. So, as I mentioned, once the income started coming in, he definitely leaned towards saving over spending. After talking at length with them both, it became clear that he saw the financial side of study as a math problem that he really enjoyed working on. He considers himself an optimizer who chose to use the interest-free government student loan program to his advantage. At one point during his study, he also worked in a hall of residence as a kitchen hand, which, remarkably, remains his favourite job to date. He was working alongside his friends because it was them who helped him get the job. He was fed dinner, he could take the leftovers home to his flat, and he even managed to get his laundry done while he was at work. The best job he ever had, he said, as he explained in detail how he financially optimised every opportunity. Now, in case you are new to student loans, basically, despite him having an income coming in which would cover a chunk of his expenses, he chose to borrow for those same expenses. Why would he do that? So that he could borrow money at 0% interest and keep his own cash in his bank earning interest. This also gave him a cash buffer, and as the years went on, his interest-free debt increased, but his interest-earning bank account balance also increased. Kate said that because her father was of the generation who attended university when it was fee-free, he didn't feel it was fair that she now had fees and living costs to pay, and he wanted to help her by paying her $150 each week, which was a huge help. During her undergraduate years, she tried to live on that, plus part-time income from working, which meant she avoided using her student loan to pay for living costs. Student loans are there for students who cannot afford to pay for university, so she did use them to pay for her fees purely because she just couldn't make enough money to cover them. She took the opposite stance to Taka and tried to avoid taking on any unnecessary debt, interest-free or not. Throughout her study, she lived as cheaply as she could, and she still managed to always put a little money into savings from every dollar she earned. Like Taka, she never inflated her lifestyle, and even when she earned stuff all, she always had a buffer or an emergency fund that was sacrosanct. She also had the chance to do a summer studentship, earning herself $5,000 in income to put towards her expenses, which was a great help. Many tertiary students live hand to mouth, constantly scraping by, working when they can get some money coming in, but it is not easy. In his last year of study, Taka's parents moved back to Japan and said that they could both live in the former family home rent-free. Not having to pay rent was a huge benefit to two very low-income students. Now, given Kate had a far longer course of study, which required her to move to a different city for postgraduate studies, she focused hard on her training and study, leaving her next to no time to work. So at this time, she relied heavily on the money her dad gave her, money she had saved up, and about $50 a week drawn down as living costs from her student loan. For a number of years, they had to live apart from each other due to their study and professional development. In 2014, he did an internship up in Whangarei, a place he absolutely loved, working full-time, earning minimum wage of just $12.50 an hour, which is $500 for a 40-hour week. He lived with other interns, spent nothing, and had a great time, still managing to save on that very small income. His move up north coincided with her move to Wellington, and because, despite their meagre incomes, they were savers, they still managed to visit each other quite regularly. Now, relief came when she did her master's as she won a $20,000 scholarship, which was an immense help. Then her final 2 years were doing an internship in Wellington, which was paid. So, all that to say, there were many moving parts to the course of study that they each took and how they made the money work, but eventually they both ended up living in Wellington. A safety net for both of them was that they always had each other. Not that they shared finances at that point, but having already been a couple for many years, they were reaching for similar goals and were able to financially support each other throughout, if required. Neither would see the other go hungry or not be able to afford rent, so in small ways they were sharing their money before completely joining their finances a few years down the track. So, at the end of their studies, how much did they owe on their student loans? Taka graduated in 2013 after 4 years of study with a $60,000 student loan, and he was 23 years old. Kate graduated in 2017 after 8 years of study, also with a $60,000 student loan. She was about 25, 26. It was very clear that Kate's pay-as-you-study approach had a major impact on the size of her debt. Now, remember I said that Taka's parents were savers. He was about to benefit from this because when his education was complete, they really generously paid $30,000 straight onto his student loan. Through borrowing $1,000 a year to put in a savings account and adding to his savings from working, Taka had managed to put $30,000 into a bank account. But because student loans are interest-free, if you remain living in New Zealand, he decided not to pay off any of his debt, but to keep the money as a buffer for himself. At the time, he thought it would be better to keep earning interest on this money and just pay the debt off slowly from the 12% taken from every paycheck from here on in. It took 4 years of full-time work to pay his student loan off in full, and once finished, he, in effect, got a 12% pay rise in his take-home pay. Now, I know the theory. Use the government money, which is taxpayers' money, I should point out, because they don't charge you interest, and use your own money from working or from the small amount of actual cash that you can get on your student loan and invest it to make yourself rich. Well, I'm yet to meet any former student who has actually clinically achieved it. But of all the people I've spoken with, I actually do think that Taka has gotten closer, slightly closer than most. But I had to ask, how rich did he make himself by doing it this way? It seems very complicated and risky. Now, sadly for you and I, he didn't keep track, but he was quite sure that he barely spent a cent that he didn't need to, and he did invest in term deposits, earning, he thought, around 4% a year. He vowed to keep his hands off his savings, and he did. Of course, he didn't start out with the full 30 grand. It took him a full 4 years to build this up. So in the early years, he had less money, earning around 4%. If he were to give it a guess, he would say that if he averaged it all out, he earned about $600 a year in interest. But given you pay a student loan establishment fee of $60 in year one and a $40 annual fee on your student loan every year thereafter, plus you pay tax on your interest earned in the bank, I calculated that his returns would have been far less than the $600. As I said, it's complicated, and I'm yet to meet anyone who tracks it in detail. But what the system of his did, he said, was something he and they both value. It gave them the security of a cash buffer in the bank, and they now refer to their cash buffer as their FU money, which is a term taken from J.L. Collins. He said he always knew that if anything changed, such as interest payments being reintroduced to student loans, or them deciding to move overseas, where they would have to pay an interest rate of almost 5%, he could pay it back straight away. Plus, he said, he always knew that it was not his money, and that if you have a $30,000 debt and $30,000 in your savings account, you actually have zero. So, although I'm not a fan of this scheme at all really, he went into this with his eyes more open than most. Now, just to play devil's advocate for a wee moment, many students say exactly what Taka just said, but when the rubber hits the road and they have a $30,000 debt and $30,000 saved, and they do decide to up and move overseas, they tend not to pay off their debt because they need that cash to get themselves overseas. They then put their head in the sand until an email from the IRD sometime down the track brings their debts plus interest back into sharp focus. Now, these are the very real scenarios and risks associated with this strategy, and I'm only digging into it a little bit deeper because I've met many students who end up with both student debt and no savings, having spent it all. While he was testing his theory of borrowing money to make money, he was telling Kate to do the same. But Kate is very much her own person, and she said no, as she wanted to borrow as little as possible, and only when she absolutely needed it. I liked her steadfastness here. It was her that would have to pay it back, so the only person who should make the decision whether or not to take it out should be her. I hear from many parents that pressure and tell their children to take out student loans, but it is not them having to pay it back. So, future students, by all means, take advice and guidance, but make your own decisions. Now, Taka took a big gamble to do what he did, and for most people I meet, it actually doesn't work. They end up with both a student loan and no money, having blown it on all sorts of things. So, if you have a teenage student wanting to do something similar, please sit them down and look at it from every single angle. No math or financial path is straightforward. So, how about Kate's student loan payoff journey? Well, in 2017, Kate's last year of education, they fully combined their finances. By this stage, with grant money, working for her internship, etc., she had saved up a total of about $30,000. And she said she vividly remembers feeling the pain of combining her hard-saved money with his. Through 8 years of really tough financial times, she had always put some aside. Having her cash cushion gave her the freedom to choose to work less in her final years of study so that she could focus on getting top grades. So this $30,000 had a lot of security attached to it. He'd been working full-time as a pharmacist for a few years by then, so he'd also saved up $100,000 or so, which was a fantastic achievement. Combining their finances was hard, but it made complete sense to both of them. His first proper job as a fully qualified pharmacist earned him $32 per hour. When Kate completed her study and began working in Wellington in 2018, she began to pay down her student loan via 12% deductions from her income. Today, in 2025, 7 years later, her student loan has dropped $15,000 to $45,000 still owing. Did you think it might be lower? Given her career, I certainly did. If they chose to, they could pay it off in full today, but instead, it will slowly be paid off over time from her income. However, since graduating, Kate has not worked full-time, which greatly slows down her student loan payoff rate. So, you ask, what happened? Well, with Taka now fully qualified and working full-time in Wellington, Kate was very excited to get all her study finished and really get some freedom back into her life. She started an internship, the final step in her training, so was on lower pay, working 4 full days with the 5th day for study, earning about $55,000 a year. Taka was pretty excited to finally have 2 almost full-time incomes. His calculations were that they would now be able to save a lot of money, and given they were both working professionals now, their incomes would begin to increase from this point on. all the mahi was about to finally pay off. They got straight into ticking off some milestones. In 2018, they did some travel, they got married, and with a deposit of about $130,000 sitting in the bank, they started house hunting in Wellington. Their house hunting excitement was soon dampened when they got a feel for the quality, which was low, and the price, which was high, of houses in Wellington. They quickly began to realise that they would be committing themselves to an enormous mortgage to buy a house they didn't really like in a suburb that was not their first choice. They would now have 2 debts, a mortgage and a student loan. However, another factor soon threw all of their plans up in the air. Very soon after starting her job, Kate found out that she was pregnant, which, while a wonderful surprise, was very awkward and quite stressful given that she had just started working. As her pregnancy progressed, she dropped a day at work, reducing her income to $48,000. They had a lot on their plate and some decisions to make. Continuing to pursue buying in Wellington, which meant that they would have to give up a lot of their life to work, to make money, to pay for a below-par house, while also paying off her student loan, and they wanted to actually see and enjoy their new child instead of being at work while they were in daycare. Well, right at this time, Taka's parents threw a huge opportunity their way. They had been renting out the family home that Kate and Taka used to live in before moving away, but it had become a hassle to manage as a rental property from Japan, and they had decided to sell it. But first, they said to all 5 of their children, if anyone wants to live there rent-free with the parents paying all the outgoings, such as rates, insurance and maintenance, well, they can. Otherwise, they would be selling it. Kate and Taka weighed up the options and took the opportunity to move south because they knew they could find work, but given they had neither rent or mortgage to pay, not work quite so much, and could therefore spend a lot of time with their baby when they were born. Plus, they knew they could still save money. As soon as their decision was made, they started the ball rolling to move, including Taka handing in his notice at work. Before they could move south and before she even started her maternity leave, their baby arrived prematurely. So much for their calm transition south, giving them time to prepare to welcome their child and time for him to find a job. It was a really hectic time, they said. Enter their FU money. Because their baby spent so many weeks in the NICU and needed extra care, Taka decided to put his job search on hold and spend time supporting his wife and child and to get settled in their new home and city. He said, "You know what? This is awesome. We don't have rent to pay. Kate was receiving maternity leave money and they had FU money if needed. So they both took the time to pour all of their efforts into nurturing their child. And they remain in that home today, and they still don't pay rent. They said that their biggest financial triumph was moving back south, giving themselves a greater work-life balance and the ability to save and invest more of their income. This was and still is an incredible opportunity that helped this young family have a much calmer start. Once they all found their feet, after 5 months off work, he started working as a pharmacist again. Pay rates were lower in the city due to supply and demand, and he had to take a pay cut from $37 to $32 an hour. He explained there were a lot of pharmacists chasing a small number of jobs. Due to not having worked with her employer very long before going on maternity leave, her maternity leave ended after 6 months, and she didn't want to go back to work so soon, so she resigned from her position. When the child was 18 months old, she returned to working a 2-day week, earning $35,000 a year. They have since had 2 more children, twins in fact, and after taking another maternity break, today she still works just 2 days a week, earning $42,000 a year. The full-time equivalent would be about $105,000, which, given her length of training and the medical profession she is in, seems really low. Well, because she chooses to work in the public health sector, her income is low, she said, and if she changed jobs, well, she could earn more. But the hours suit her and she really likes the role she's found. So for her and for her family, this works. Also, these two, particularly Taka, spend a lot of time doing math. If she were to increase her hours, the income earned would barely cover the daycare costs that they would have to pay. Professionally, though, these reduced working hours have come at a cost, and many years after completing her education, she still feels she doesn't have the hands-on experience of someone who has worked full-time. You need time in a role to get your skills up, she said. And not to harp on about student loans again, but particularly for women, this situation is very common and one that few women think of at the outset of their study. Years out of the workforce or working reduced hours mean that student debts linger a lot longer for women than they do for men. Given they have joint finances, they could pay it down, but they've made the strategic decision as a couple not to because it is interest-free debt. Once Taka went back to work, he worked full-time, but after 2 years, in 2020, he changed jobs. Why would that be? Well, he asked for a pay rise, but he was turned down, so he walked. Again, having FU money or cash savings meant that he knew he had money behind him to leave. He shared that changing jobs completely is often the best way to get the jump in pay you are looking for, and his hourly rate rose from $32 to $36 when he began working full-time at a new pharmacy soon after. In 2022, when they found they were expecting twins, they remembered how helpful it was to have 2 of them at home when their first child was born. So they decided that all hands on deck would be helpful again. So Taka asked for 6 months of unpaid time off, having already decided that he would resign if they didn't approve his leave. And he said that his employer approved his leave because they realised he genuinely needed time off more than he needed the money. Again, they mostly lived on Kate's maternity leave income, plus, once their children were born, they were eligible for government payments in the form of a Best Start payment and a family tax credit, he said. As they prepared for this time, they went into savings mode, setting as much money aside as a buffer to cover any shortfall, and after 6 months off paid work, he said that their net worth, which he tracks carefully on his own spreadsheet, dropped by about $15,000. It was at this time that Taka really began to look deeply into optimising their finances. During the break from work, he read the popular Vicki Robbins book, Your Money or Your Life, and at its core, the book promotes mindful consumption, simplicity, and the idea that money represents traded life energy. They decided he didn't want to spend his precious and finite life energy working a 40-hour-a-week job, and instead of returning to work full-time, he negotiated a 3-day working week with his employer. They'd worked out how much money they needed to live and to save, and saw little reason to work beyond those requirements. With a family of 5 to hang out with, this was where he wanted to spend his life energy. Now, the Vicki Robbins book teaches you to calculate your real hourly wage, or the real cost of earning money, not just in hours worked, but in time and energy spent on everything related to your job. It's interesting to think about, and I'll quickly explain it for you. I can see how Taka, who is a guy who likes numbers and detail, really dug into this concept. So number 1, you start with your monthly after-tax and deductions take-home pay. Number 2, you subtract work-related expenses, such as commuting costs like fuel, car maintenance or bus fare. Subtract work clothing costs, meals bought during work hours, childcare paid while you work, the cost of stress, such as paying for therapy, or spending money shopping to help you unwind from work, and subtract time and money spent recovering from work, such as taking a holiday. Number 3, you add up the total hours spent on work each month, including time at your job, commute time, getting ready for work and decompressing after work, and any time spent on job-related errands or networking. And finally, number 4, to calculate your real hourly wage, you subtract your monthly work-related expenses from your take-home pay, and then you divide that result by the total number of hours you spend each month on all work-related activities. So, say you earn $4,000 a month with work-related expenses of $800 a month, well, your work hours add up to 240 hours a month, so your real hourly wage is actually $13.33 per hour. And now that you know this, you can evaluate every purchase in terms of how much life energy it costs you. For example, a $200 pair of shoes is worth 15 hours of your life. Working out his real hourly wage was quite the revelation for Taka. He calculated that because of the government family tax credits and Best Start payments, if he worked more than 3 days a week, for every additional hour he worked, he was only earning $8 per hour. That was his real hourly wage. Plus, if he worked more, they would then have to factor in childcare, which added more stress to everyone involved. He explained that for Kate, if she worked more, her real hourly wage was even lower because she would also have to pay 12% of her income to her student loan, plus money into her KiwiSaver. He said that if she worked another day a week, it would impact the government payments and her real hourly wage dropped even lower. Plus, a combination of government support and wages gave them an income that they could rely on and budget with. He said that most people would logically think that if you work more, you earn more and you will have more money. But digging deep into the IRD website that shows what you're entitled to per child, tax thresholds, and calculating KiwiSaver deductions, student loan repayments, and especially the high costs of daycare, well, they would end up financially worse off by working more hours. At that time, with 3 children under the age of 4, taking the working less option but still having enough money to live well would give them a much more balanced lifestyle, relieve everyone's stress levels, and provide a really supportive environment for the kids, and it allows them to be the primary caregivers for their own children instead of earning more money just to pay someone else to do it. They structured their working week so that Taka worked 2 days while Kate was at home. They then had 1 day when they were both at home, and then she went to work 2 days while he was at home. Neither worked weekends, and they were both earning similar incomes from their 2-day-a-week jobs, and 2 part-time incomes equals 1 full-time income. I was keen to dig into the numbers of what they earn today and where their income comes from now. Well, from their 2 part-time incomes, they earn $80,000 a year, which is about $64,000 after tax, he said, and they receive it in the following way. After tax and after a 12% student loan deduction and a 3% KiwiSaver contribution, Kate earns $620 a week. After tax and a 3% KiwiSaver contribution, Taka earns $600 a week. Additionally, on one of his work days, he sometimes fills in at a pharmacy 100 kilometres away, and by doing so, he gets paid an extra weekly payment of $240, which is a tax-free mileage payment. He minuses $40 for fuel costs and he pockets the $200, giving him a total income of $800 for that week. He calculated that it would take him about 20 hours in his current job to earn that extra money. Instead, he spends a few hours in the car, enjoying the drive and listening to podcasts. And he might even be listening to this episode right now. And if so, hello Taka, and please drive carefully. Now, they currently receive a family tax credit of $251 a week from Working for Families, plus a $137 Working for Families Best Start payment. All this stuff confuses me a wee bit, I'm not going to lie, but you can go onto the IRD website and search Working for Families weekly payments to find out your eligibility. Meaning a total income of about $1,600 a week, with an additional $200 a week if Taka travels for work on one of his 2 work days. When their youngest children turn 3 later in the year, they will lose the $137 Best Start payment. He has run the numbers of what would happen to their total income if he worked another 2 days a week now. Now, with an increase in income would come a reduction in government support, meaning a total increase in income of $196 a week for 16 hours of work. That is $9.80 an hour. If Kate were to work the 2 extra days, it would be less because of her 12% student loan repayments, meaning a total increase in income of just $102 a week for 16 hours of work. That's $6.40 an hour. So that student loan just keeps coming back up. By the numbers alone, working more doesn't make financial sense to them. Both of them feel very lucky to be getting this government support, and it has really let them enjoy the significant amount of time they spend with their 3 children so much more. Both look forward to working more in the future, when it will feel financially worth it to do the extra work and receive a paycheck that reflects those extra hours put in. But for now, they are loving family life. They are optimizing their time and their money and directing their life energy where they really find value. Nothing they are doing is illegal. They are not gaming the system in any type of way. Instead, they are working within it to make it work for their family. When they lose that $137 payment later in the year, they will reassess their work hours then. This all-out focus on time and money naturally led to investing, and in 2020, as so many did, he started to dabble. Dabbling is a poor way to invest, and by 2021, he realised there might be a better way, so he went on a learning deep dive, hunting for resources to read, listen to, and learn from. Today, in 2025, these are the resources he would recommend to you. Myself, The Happy Saver, both my blog and podcast, Die with Zero by Bill Perkins, the Mad Fientist podcast, and Fientist is Fientist, The Simple Path to Wealth. He said he always says this book is like his Bible. The Ramit Sethi Money for Couples podcast, which he said is really good to help him understand his bad money habits. Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robbins, and The Barefoot Investor, because it's a great way for anyone just starting their money journey, trying to figure out how to work, save, invest, and spend money. And finally, the blogger Mr. Money Mustache. So, given he taught himself about investing, what is he actually investing in now? Well, as mentioned, it was 2020 when he began to think about investing. They had $150,000 originally earmarked as a house deposit, still sitting in a term deposit earning a few % interest. Just like everyone else during COVID, he was thinking of buying shares. To dip his toe in the investing water, he signed up with investment firm Milford. Why Milford? Well, put simply, he saw their advertising, and when he Googled them, they seemed to have a consistent track record, seemed reliable, and they posted some good gains on their website. He signed up online and got started investing their money. He also opened up an account with provider Hatch with the intention of playing around to make heaps of money to become the next Warren Buffett. However, this may come as a surprise, every stock he chose didn't quite work out. Despite showing his analytical chops earlier in our conversation, he said he invested $10,000 of their hard-earned, hard-saved money in the full knowledge that he might mess it up, which he did. In retrospect, it was just too much money to be playing around with, he said. And this foray into stock picking has led to his biggest financial loss and his biggest learning curve to date. He still owns most of those stocks, he said. At one stage, they were down 70% and are still down 25%. He continued to invest more with this provider, but chose ETF or index funds instead, and the current combined value of their Hatch investment is about $135,000. They are mindful of the FIF tax rules and are trying to avoid heading into that territory because paying FIF tax adds a whole other layer of complexity and confusion to their investing that I'm just not going to go into here. But thankfully, that experience and all the resources he has mentioned taught him that investing in ETFs is the better way to go, and his stock-picking career was, thankfully, over before it truly got started. Now he just has to decide when the right time is to cut his losses and sell his individual company shares. He next began to use provider InvestNow, as they are cheaper to use than Milford, plus gave him access to the ETF funds that he was looking for. In 2021, they moved their money from Milford to ETF funds with Hatch and InvestNow. Also in 2021, Kate's grandmother really generously gifted her an early inheritance of $100,000, and with more confidence in their plans this time, it was invested into their InvestNow ETFs, and ever since, they have been investing as much as they can. But in case you think they picked a plan and played on through, like many, they continued to refine their strategy. After initially buying into a New Zealand top 50 ETF and an Australian 200 ETF, they kept these and began investing into a far larger US 500 ETF instead, before changing again to investing any new money into a total world fund. Their Invest Now account has a total balance of $221,000. $30,000 of this amount remains in New Zealand and Australian ETFs, and the remainder is split between the US 500 and Total World Fund. When I asked them what they would do if a sweet 10 grand was dropped into their bank account today, Taka would put $7,000 in the Total World Fund and $3,000 in a travel sinking fund with their bank. Kate would split the money more evenly, with $5,000 going into a Total World Fund and $5,000 into a travel sinking fund. Now, both have also been in KiwiSaver for many years and have shopped around, moving from Milford to Colonel, and now they are both with Invest Now. He has a balance of $75,000 and she has just $41,000. They used to split contributions between a US 500 and a Total World Fund, but now only add new money to a Total World Fund. In addition to everything else, he also has a Sharesies account with about $3,000 in it, which is primarily invested in New Zealand stocks, and collectively he is down. He is planning to sell them off when they improve, adding, hopefully they improve. They also have a US 500 index fund investment with low-fee index fund provider Colonel, which has a value of about $23,000. He wanted a fund that had low fees from which he potentially could sell from time to time if he needed to. As is super common in the early stages of becoming lifelong investors, there have been many investments scattered about. Now, I hear this all the time. We research and we learn and we begin to invest. We continue to learn, meaning that we change our investments. And that's okay, as long as you kind of tidy things up as you go along and ultimately settle into a long-term strategy with just one, maybe two providers. Because he previously made some poor investments, he's very reluctant to sell them and lock in his losses. Now, this is called a sunk cost fallacy, and it's the phenomenon where a person is reluctant to abandon a strategy because they have invested heavily in it, even when it is clear that abandonment would be more beneficial. In time, investors often reach a point where they see the lost opportunity cost of sticking with an investment that didn't work out, while you hang around waiting for those companies to hopefully improve. Your money could be invested and growing elsewhere. Now, all of these investments add up to $500,000, which is an excellent achievement for this couple. Minus her student loans, this gives them a net worth of about $455,000, give or take. In addition to this, they keep about $20,000 in their bank accounts, which they consider their FU money, meaning that it's probably unlikely that they will have to sell any of those Colonel investments if they reach a sticky spot. Plus, in the back of their mind, they know that they have some guaranteed income in the form of government support, and if push came to shove, their parents would help. I like how they are thinking about all aspects of this. They've found themselves in a very unique situation when it comes to housing, and I asked about the long-term viability of them living rent-free and if the money they have spread across various investments, including KiwiSaver, may need to be liquidated to buy a house one day. Taka's parents have no plans to sell the house, and it's highly likely that they might gift it to them one day. But how would his siblings feel about that if it happened? Taka's parents have had a lifetime of saving and a lifetime of not spending money on themselves, meaning they built up significant savings, and over the years they've not loaned but gifted his siblings with $100,000 each to help with a house deposit, and more recently they were each gifted a further $300,000. Taka has not received any of these gifts, given the fact that they live rent-free in the house and will likely be given it sometime in the future. Taka has talked about it with his siblings, and everyone has been given the same opportunity, and these large financial gifts have been given at a time in their lives, in their 30s, when their need for money is the greatest because they are wanting to buy homes and settle down, and I would imagine that Taka's siblings are grateful for the help, and their parents are pleased to see good choices being made with their early inheritances. Now, with the home Taka and Kate live in, they share the bills with his parents. His parents pay the rates and the insurance and any maintenance, much like a landlord would, but If Taka wants to do any modernising or upgrades, well, they pay for that themselves. They are really thankful and feel so fortunate that they chose to take this housing opportunity that was offered to them, and that all of his siblings were equally well sorted. They said that this has become the perfect house for them. So with housing sorted, where to from here with their life and their money? Well, they plan to reach financial independence by 50 and are concentrating hard on managing their money well while enjoying time as a family. They plan to try to keep their spending closer to $50,000 per year than 60, which means their FI number would be $1.25 million. Now, your FI number, your financial independence number, is your total annual expenses times 25. So $50,000 times 25 is $1.25 million invested. Once you reach this number, you can sell off 4% per year, which is $50,000, and use this money to pay your annual expenses. They are focused on working towards this number now, and when they get there, they plan on reevaluating their situation. But this is their lean FIRE number, and ideally, they want it to be more. They want to travel when their kids are at home, and they want to be able to travel to visit their kids when they've grown up and left home. So they are factoring in those scenarios, leading them to thinking that aiming for a FI number of $2 million, which would give them $80,000 of income a year, would be ideal. Their investing is well underway. It still needs refining, especially if they are planning to use the tools of the FIRE movement, Financial Independence Retire Early. This supposes that their FI number of 1.25 million is invested in a total world fund or similar, and their investments are currently spread across a myriad of investments which will be placing a drag on their progress. I suspect that in time they will keep refining their investments, but they are absolutely moving in the right direction, I think. With $500,000 invested and working for them, with steady deposits into their investments, time and compounding, they will reach their goals or be very close, which is pretty exciting to think about. While they have some big long-term goals, what about the daily money management for this couple? Well, they carry contents insurance and car insurance with Trade Me Insurance, and although they've had to make a couple of claims and they were not that great to deal with, they were the cheapest that he could find. They both have life insurance policies with cover of $500,000 each, and when they reach their FI number, they will cancel these policies. Kate said with a bit of a groan that Taka is always trying to get a deal, whether it be chasing their internet and power companies for a cheaper rate or just cutting the weekly grocery shop. He's changed their internet provider so many times now because he saves hundreds of dollars each time that he knows you should never change the provider of anything around Christmas time because you are guaranteed a nightmare. He said they lost internet for a full month once, and if you give a provider a month of lead-in time, it makes it more of a seamless transition. But it is this attention to the cents that have helped the dollars invested grow. You just have to find the balance between frugality and being a Scrooge. They spend about $1,100 a week on living costs in total, spending $350 of that on their weekly shop, and spending about $30 on takeouts or cafes per week, choosing to make all their meals at home and packing lunches to take to work, school or kindy. They do the majority of their spending on their credit card, and once a week when they are paid, he calculates what they've spent on their card that week and transfers that amount to a separate bank account, and on the credit card due date, he pays the balance owing in full from the money that he has set aside. He also has automatic transfers set up that move money into investment accounts. In addition to their own investments, they have also used provider Hatch to set up a US 500 ETF to invest $100 a month for each of their 3 children. Their oldest child is now 6 and now receives $6 of pocket money for doing jobs around the house. And they are using the Barefoot Investor Jam Jar method to teach them to give, to save, and to spend some money. As they get older, they will be educating them about investing and encouraging them to get a part-time job as soon as they feel they're old enough, and definitely while still at home. Given Taka has taken great pleasure in creating his own spreadsheets, I asked how he is calculating how much he can invest each month. The simple reply was that they just invest as much as possible, which is about $500 each week, meaning $26,000 a year. Their system is simple. Everything goes on the credit card or FPOS card as Plan B, because I guess if the surcharge is just too high on the credit card, and everything else goes into their investments. They don't have sinking fund bank accounts where they are saving up for things. Their $20,000 of FU money is more or less the only money that they keep aside. In 2021, Taka emailed me with a few questions, which I answered, and 4 years later, he replied. Sometimes it does take people a while. Although a little haphazard, they had focused and made good progress on investing, but now they were trying to work out how to enjoy spending a little bit of money. Now, when you think about it, it's not too difficult to see some similarities between Taka and his own parents, who were hardcore savers. And when Taka the saver married Kate, also the saver, it's just not surprising that frugality and investing have taken centre stage. They take full advantage of all the free and cheap activities that their city offers them, but I encourage them to use their discipline habits to flex their spending muscles a lot more if they see something that they all truly want to do. You can do this by opening a bank savings account and creating an auto transfer of a set amount of money into that account each week. Then, as a family, discuss what fun things you might want to do together and work out what they might cost. When the bank account reaches that figure, go and do that thing. Practice spending money. I think the key to this account that will head savers who hate to spend off at the pass is making the agreement that this money must be spent and enjoyed. And while Taka might lean more towards counting their money, Kate is an accomplished planner. So if they work their skills together and create a sinking fund, she is an expert in turning that money into a family adventure. She said that she is the organizer and he shows up and gets a wonderful surprise. Their $5,000 wedding was an example of that. She planned it and he turned up for the best day of his life. She organised a trip to Wanaka, booking affordable accommodation for 2 nights, cooking, freezing and prepping all meals and snacks at home, so they knew that all family members would eat it and they didn't have the expense or hassle of eating out. And they spent some money on experiences. Plus, it snowed, which was unexpected and fun. Now, layered on top of this planning is their family rule that although they are prepped and have a plan, if they are away and they want to eat, do, or see something, they will. And this came about because in the past, they regretted not doing something just to avoid spending money. But both agreed spending money on family fun is something they are still getting used to doing. So I really do encourage them to create a specific account for saving up for family fun. It will make trips like this more frequent. Now, Taka has listened to all of the Mad Scientist podcast episodes where the podcaster explained in great detail what an absolute Scrooge, and for him, how unhappy he actually was, while he was saving and investing in his efforts to retire as early in life as humanly possible. He did retire very young, but he reflected that he missed out on life in the pursuit of FI. It was only after he retired early that he realised he had pushed it too far, and it took him a long time to put some balance in his life and literally teach himself to enjoy spending money. Taka knows he's got the ability to be like that, so he is using the lessons of others to help him and Kate live for today while investing for tomorrow. He plans to work a little more when the kids are older, and if they have to work an extra couple of years, well, so be it. In the meantime, they will enjoy the journey, enjoying their kids while they are at home, because time with their kids is time that they will never get back. So, what about a quick elevator pitch for this couple? How would they sum up their approach to money? Well, for Kate, she said, living within your means and saving and investing gives you a buffer. And with that buffer comes freedom and flexibility that mean you are not trapped. Freedom to walk away from a job, to take time off with your kids, and to live a more balanced life on your terms. And for Taka, he works out how much life energy he's trading for every purchase. measuring the cost in hours worked, not just dollars. A PlayStation, 100 hours of work. A car, hundreds more. It puts everything in stark perspective. He took it to the extreme, earning far more than he spent and almost always saying no to spending, but now he's trying to unlearn being that strict and find more balance. So that feels like a pretty good spot for me to begin to wrap things up. But before I do, I've just got a quick message from today's sponsor. If your finances are holding you back from living the life you want, try PocketSmith out. They've got the tools to help you make money management easier. And have we got a deal for you? Happy Saver listeners get a whopping 50% off your first 2 months of PocketSmith's foundation plan. To get your deal, go to pocketsmith.com/The Happy Saver. That's pocketsmith.com/The Happy Saver. There have been so many references in this episode to these two living on the bones of their butts while they studied, and these frugal habits have come with them in the years since. Yes, he said his colleagues have mocked him for making jam on toast for lunch at work or eating boring beans and rice, but for him, A, he likes that type of food, and B, it's an easy way to save money, so why not take the easy wins? Although I often reference Taka when it came to discussing numbers, Kate is fully on board with their plans and each have equal say because these two are a great team. They sometimes think what their life might have been like if they didn't make this decision to move south, to work less and enjoy their family. If they had ended up buying a house in Wellington with a high mortgage, life would look very different today. So they are both equally pleased to be where they are, working and living the way they do. While trying to spend less money, Taka is always also trying to make more, but he is a stickler for doing the math and working out if more mahi does mean more money. I like his use of the Vicky Robbins formula to work out where they are spending their life energy. They have both found their sweet spot for now and have settled into a 2-day working week each, which, while unusual in this era, is possible. I know this because Johnny and I did the same thing for many years. It's made easier by their housing situation, and I take my hat off to them for embracing this opportunity because they have managed to remove the biggest issue that young families face in New Zealand, finding affordable housing. Theirs is a really unique position and one worth taking advantage of. While Taka paid off his student loan and had a small win by earning a little bit of interest, Kate's will potentially be around for decades still to come. And while they do have a plan for it, and I get that zero interest and inflation mean it makes mathematical sense for them to, quote, not bother too much about the debts, for those embarking on tertiary study, particularly women, I absolutely implore you to please take your student loan seriously because they have a habit, particularly for women, of following you throughout your life. So, I think you've heard enough of my voice for now. So I'll finish by saying a massive thank you to Kate and Taka for so very generously spending a few hours on the phone talking to me and sharing all the ins and outs of your unique and really interesting financial experiences and situation. I love how you are both different and similar to each other, and your skills and strengths work so well together, meaning that both of you feel heard and both of you are looking at all of your options and opportunities and carefully choosing your own path. And I wish you and your 3 kids the absolute best. So that is all from me this week. And you know, if you want to get in touch, you can find me over at thehappysaver.com. And please do share my podcast and my blog with your friends. It's still the very best way that I can help other people learn something new about money. And finally, I would love it if you would talk more about money with your own friends and whānau and help me continue to help others be better with money. So until next time, happy saving.